Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michelle Jobin. I am a journalist, producer, and weather specialist based here in Toronto. And just over to my right, Sita, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sita. I am the founder and general partner of Siam Capital, where we focus on decade-defining innovation at the intersection of sustainability, consumer, across the value chain, and what we call transformative technology.
And Oren?
Hi, everybody. I'm Oren Zaslansky, the founder and CEO of Flock Freight. We are a freight tech company working on building a smarter supply chain. With every other truck we see on the highway half empty, that's both a sustainable misuse. We're going to burn the same amount of carbon either way. And so is the only certified B Corp working in freight. Sustainability is a big, big part of our mission.
So I'm going to start out with lifting a little bit of information from an article that you and Flock Freight, Oren, did for World Economic Forum. And you quoted a stat there saying that at this point in time, only 21% of business leaders see a clear case for economic or environmental sustainability in their business strategy. But we're at the point where the future of the planet is on the line. So given that, can we rethink business as usual? And that's what we're here today. We're here today to see if we can flip the script. So I wanted to put it to you first, Oren. How has your company approached sustainability in your business model?
Yeah, it's obviously at Flock, it's at the very core. We do algorithmic carpooling or ride sharing of commercial freight. So at the very heart of Flock is we want to take lots of customers' freight shipments that are not large enough to fill up a truck. We want to put them together and make sure that that truck is always full. In doing so, we're going to make sure that the trucking company makes as much money as possible. We're going to make sure the manufacturers only pay for the amount of truck that we need. And as importantly, we're going to make sure that the carbon that is produced is most efficient, meaning we're going to make sure that truck is full all the time. Let's not ship air. I think, unfortunately, a lot of business leaders think of sustainable strategies at odds with building enterprise value. I would argue, just from a practical standpoint, at Flock, our ability to go to market as a differentiated provider with sustainability at the very core of our mission has been absolutely central to building enterprise value. It's been central to acquiring customers. It's been central to defending our business and scaling our business as we continue to march on. So I would challenge all the business leaders, everybody here today and potentially watching this, to think about how do we take sustainability and use it as a wedge to be able to go to market, drive valuable, profitable products and services in order to scale your businesses and truly build economic value, as opposed to thinking of it as it's simply a compliance item or it's a drag on my business. I think that at Flock, it absolutely is central to a very high enterprise value.
And if you can do this in an industry that isn't necessarily known for sustainability, freight, it really does set an example. Sita, from the investor side of things, how do you at Siam Capital approach sustainability?
Well, in short, we're born out of this thesis or hypothesis, a first principle, if you will, to borrow Ray Dalio's language, that over our lifetime, one of the greatest generational opportunities, if you will, is really investing in the sustainability transition. It's not only one of the greatest challenges, but it's also one of the greatest economic opportunities. So in short, it's essentially at the crux of who we are, how we think about the world, why we even exist. So to echo Oren's point, I very much agree in that we need to change the narrative around sustainability, not even just from the trade-off perspective, but also from thinking about it as a concession, when really we should be thinking about the concept of sustainability as something that we leverage for not just short, medium, but true long-term competitive advantage, because that is the direction that we are moving in, generationally speaking.
So to set that example, because you're both leading in your fields when it comes to sustainability, we want to talk about flipping the script, looking at this as an opportunity. So, Oren, can you speak to what unique opportunities putting sustainability at the forefront of what you do has afforded you?
It's why we exist.
Right.
It's, again, I hate to be repetitive, but the thought that sustainability is at odds with profit or efficiency or building enterprise value, I think couldn't be more untrue. Our largest shareholder is SoftBank, and everybody knows who SoftBank is. They had a team that led on freight, logistics, and sustainability. We were able to raise money, to build an enterprise, to go to market, to capture customers who are looking for a better way. I think there's a key to this, though, and I think it's really incumbent upon all of us as business leaders and as operators, and that's that we have to make sustainability both frictionless and profitable. I think this is fundamental at the core, that if we go to market in a way where we suggest to the customer, sorry, this is going to be harder, I'm going to reduce value, maybe I'm going to give you lower quality, the price is going to be slightly higher, then this is going to feel like a heavy lift. I think to the degree, though, that we can go to our customers and go to market and say, we're actually going to find a way to be quality neutral, or maybe even improve quality for you. We're going to find a way to be cost neutral or reduce your costs. We're going to increase profitability. Frictionless meaning we're going to be easier to do business with. It becomes a highly differentiated and defensible way in which you can scale your business, and at the core of it, create more and more ever-increasing sustainable outcomes.
It really has been framed as medicine, sort of, that we have to, it's like, oh, this is something that's going to be difficult for us to implement, and you've found ways to not only make it sustainability a focus, but also make it profitable as well. Sita, what unique opportunities has having sustainability from an environmental perspective at the forefront of what you do, what has that afforded you at Siam Capital?
Well, I guess I'll reframe the question in a different way slightly, because given the fact that we are a sustainability thematic fund, we look at the entire world through that lens. Mm-hmm. So the nuance in which we invest is, we think one of our other hypotheses with data to back is that really consumers are going to be one of the greatest driving forces of that change, either by choice or most oftentimes by necessity. And as a result, it will also impact businesses, supply chains, marketplaces, to also revolutionize the way that they do business. So the way we think about opportunities is really that when you think about sustainability, you have to understand all the different intricacies of how it connects to the consumer and to the business. So where we do invest is at this intersection of consumer, across the value chain, sustainability, and what we call transformative technology. But just to take a step back, the way we really think about the opportunity of the sustainability transition is almost like a solar system, and consumers being the nucleus of change. So the first area that we'll invest in that really is relevant to how Oren is thinking about his business as well is the rise of the conscious consumer, and that will change every aspect of our lives, what we do, how we spend our time, what we eat, what services we use. But really the crux of the opportunity is, how does that impact businesses? So if consumers have to change the way they behave, businesses also need to change the way they do business. And the unique opportunities that I would say presents for us is that we just think about this whole narrative in a completely different way. We don't silo these opportunities, if you will, in fintech or in SaaS. We think about, like, if the world has to exist in a sustainable way, how can we position ourselves cross-vertically to essentially prepare for that, and not just prepare for it, but anticipate it and leverage it?
It's almost as if the consumer is further in the forefront of this than businesses are at this point. Because when we look at that, 4 out of 5 CEOs say, okay, well, maybe, if they make this more convenient for us, maybe we'll start thinking about sustainability. But the consumer is voting with their dollar at this point. Oren, are you finding that bleeds into what you do?
Absolutely. Sita and I were just discussing backstage. My sister works in fashion. She's a fashion designer. And she had educated me in the 90s and the 2000s. There was a seismic shift from supply-driven choice to demand-driven choice. Right. That it used to be the brand, so to speak, said to the consumer, you're welcome. This is what you're going to buy. Versus today, it's the exact opposite. The consumer says, this is what I want, this is what I expect. So, for instance, with the rise of Scope 3 emissions reporting for publicly listed companies in the United States, consumers now have that information. They can now look at it. We can measure this. It's quantifiable. And consumers are making choices every day and deciding that they have brand affinity that in part is whatever their aesthetic is, but it would also be sustainability. Do they believe that this brand is aligned with their values? Maybe not just their personal preferences that relates to fashion and how that clothing looks. We're seeing it in a massive way. We're supporting some of the largest, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 listed companies in the world. And more they're coming to us and saying, hey, first of all, we only want to pay for the amount of stuff that we ship, so this is financially wasteful. From a sustainability standpoint, they're now realizing that they have an opportunity to differentiate with their consumer, capture more market share, and defend their business. And we're talking about, at the highest scale possible. the consumers, when they come together, have more power, more decision making than I think they sometimes realize. And I think the largest companies in the world recognize that. I really do. And I think many of them are jumping on board with sustainable choices. They don't always know how to do it, right? So there's the scope 1 and scope 2 and how they can be more sustainable in what they do within their firm. And that can be very challenging for a lot of these companies, certainly. We don't want to vilify them. They are offering us products and services we all benefit from. The trucking industry, everybody eats food. That food came to you on a truck. So that's a very real thing. I don't think it's a question of or. I think it's an and choice that the consumers are starting to recognize is how can I make a better, more informed, sustainable choice given, the supply chain is the number 2 producer of greenhouse gas behind methane, from the cows, basically.
Right.
Things have to come on trucks. So the answer isn't let's stop shipping things. The answer is how can we do it more sustainably? Consumers are getting that more and more. They're driving it bottom up. And I think that pace is actually accelerating.
And I will echo your point and almost play devil's advocate in a way to our own businesses, if you will, is that consumers' drive for this is not in isolation. It's coupled with significant regulatory tailwinds. And I think that can't be ignored. It creates an economic environment where sustainability is not just expected, but it's also encouraged, again, from an economic perspective. So I think that can't really be understated. And then the other point that you mentioned that really is something that we take into consideration is that point around scale and the magnitude of impact that we can make on the sustainability side at scale. I mean, in the US alone, consumers make up over 70% of the GDP. This pattern is actually pretty replicable across other developed markets. And at the time, not anymore, but one of the most valuable companies in the world was making cars for consumers.
Right.
The most valuable tech company in the world is e-commerce enablement for consumers. So on aggregate, we, as people who vote with our wallet, we are incredibly powerful. And we are also what drives businesses to change, but it's also coupled with significant regulatory tailwinds and sort of makes for the perfect storm on why it's not an or question, but it's an and question, because if you don't capture it and you don't leverage it, you're actually leaving money on the table.
Right, which I think is going to get people's attention when we're talking about, again, it comes back to the bottom line for some people, and that's important. I can only imagine that it hasn't been without challenges to try to lead from a sustainable lens. Can you speak to any particular challenges that you've had?
Absolutely. I'm sure we can probably bond on some of the challenges, both from an operator and investor side, but I think it really comes down to really 2 single factors. One is cost. The other one is really capital return. And the notion of cost as a tension around sustainability is actually quite simple, in that no solution can be long-term sustainable if it is not cost competitive. I would say that most of us should agree on that, and it should be an uncontroversial statement, but it's still for some reason being tested because we think we need to make some sort of cost sacrifice. It's just not sustainable in the long run. And we're seeing companies come down the cost curve or getting a little bit more creative about how they go to market. Maybe they work on the more high-end commercial applications before they can bring down their cost curve. And then the second point is around capital return. Especially as a fund manager, one of the biggest questions is, are we compromising our return expectations by investing in this space? And I can wholeheartedly say with data to back that we aren't. In fact, we're actually operating in a slice of the market that is only going to grow in market value over time. And we've already seen this. So there's limited data so far, but even in the last 4 years, climate stocks have actually outperformed their peers in the same industry baskets. And of course, it's not a complete one-to-one proxy, but ESG companies also outperform companies that essentially don't take these things into consideration at the forefront. I will say that there's a whole other conversation that Or and I can probably vent on backstage between ESG and sustainability. But all in all, it really comes down to cost and capital return.
Or in any particular challenges?
Yeah, for Flock, we started a carpooling platform for freight from zero.
Okay.
It took years of my life. I mean, it's so hard to build that in any industry. It wouldn't really matter. Freight probably is a little bit more challenging. There were times along the way, I mean, your original question was sort of like existential challenges to making sure you stay focused on the mission of sustainability. At the heart, it's what we do. The larger we are, the more freight we pool, the more carbon we reduce on a per pallet ship basis. Yet it's really hard because I completely agree with Sita. It's got to be profitable. you have to be financially sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable. And you've got to find a way to make those two things work. Our CTO, Lou Sines, who's here today somewhere, had challenged me maybe 2-3 years in. It was really hard. Woe is us. We're trying to raise a Series A. You know, CETA won't give me the cash. It's super hard.
And now they have SoftBank. They're all good.
we're okay. But it was, you know, it's challenging to stay convicted when you're creating a category, when you're bringing an environmentally sustainable solution to market in a way that's also financially sustainable. And he used the metaphor for me, actually, Tesla. We imagined in the early days of Tesla that it's very hard. It's hard for them to make money. It's a very expensive endeavor. And what if they had decided that they would compromise just a little and they would put an ICE range extender in that car? Just a couple gallons, just enough to take away the range anxiety of those early models, which didn't have the range that they do now, didn't have the supercharging network. His theory to me, and it was very persuasive, was they couldn't do that. Had they done that, they could lose their way. It would have been the safer thing to do, but that, we're making all this up, of course, but that theoretically Tesla wouldn't be what it is today, formerly the most valuable company in the world, maybe again, you know, in 10 minutes, who knows. You have to really believe in what you're building. You have to be deeply convicted. We call ourselves missionaries, not mercenaries. We believe it. We're building something for profit. It has to have very high enterprise value, has to return to our investors, our shareholders, our stakeholders. We have to provide customers with frictionless, high quality, low cost solutions. And at the same time, it's incredibly important to us that we're flock, that we achieve the thing we set out to do, because it's why we exist and it's why we're going to win. I think for anybody looking to bring these kind of solutions to market, you'll be tested. You'll be tested. I imagine CETA's been tested. You'll be tested over and over again. But sticking to your guns on this and maintaining your conviction is why we're differentiated and ultimately why we're defensible at scale.
We have time for one more question because we're talking about all of this with the future in mind. Let's talk about the future. CETA, where do you see yourself strategically moving in the next 5 to 10 years under this lens?
So we fundamentally believe that sustainability investing will soon in the future be synonymous with smart investing. So the very notion or concept that sustainability investing or climate conscious companies are in some ways merely a vertical of the broad technology landscape is in and itself a reflection of our misunderstanding of the magnitude of this opportunity. It is going to demand cross-vertical transformations. And we really fundamentally believe that that language of just siloing sustainability investing is in and of itself a limiting factor, because companies shouldn't just take it into consideration. We should be leveraging it. And that's really how we can be long-term competitive. And as investors, how we can capture long-term value.
Oren?
3 to 5 years from now, Flock Freight will be larger, pooling more freight, bringing ever-increasing carbon reduction to our customers. We love what we're doing. We're thankful to have made the bets that we have, and we anticipate just doing more of it in the future.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here today, and CETA and Oren, thank you so much for sharing your company's stories with us.
Thanks for having me.